Excuse me, sir, are you lost? The janitorial facilities are down in the basement. Or did you come up here looking for scraps? Tonight, the top floor of the Sterling Crown Tower seemed detached from the mundane world below, floating among the clouds above Los Angeles. The light from thousands of crystals on the grand hall ceiling cascaded down, glinting off the deep red wine in glasses that had aged for decades. This was not just Sarah Williams' 18th birthday celebration, the only daughter and heiress of the William family, but also a stage for the signing of a billion-dollar investment deal. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of money and power. Lavish gowns studded with rhinestones swept across the marble floor, the clinking of glasses blending with the hollow praises of the super-rich. Sarah stood at the center, radiant as a queen, lifting her champagne flute, basking in absolute admiration. Just as the elegant music tapered into a low note, the crowd's attention suddenly shifted. The large doors opened, and Kevin walked in. A complete contrast to the sea of bespoke tuxedos, Kevin stood awkwardly in a faded windbreaker, worn khakis, and scuffed sneakers. He calmly walked through the crowd, which parted on either side, until he stood before the host of the party. "Good evening, Miss Sarah, Mr. and Mrs. William," Kevin said, his voice steady and clear. "I am Kevin, the alternate representative sent to discuss the final terms of tonight's contract." Sarah narrowed her eyes, her gaze sweeping from Kevin's head down to his worn sneakers, as if he were some kind of contaminated alien. She fell silent for 2 seconds, then suddenly burst into loud laughter, a shrill, piercing sound that tore through the dignified atmosphere of the party. "Hey, mister," Sarah sneered, her tone dripping with mockery as she pointed directly at Kevin's face. "Are you lost? The janitor's restroom is in the basement down there, or are you here to ask for leftovers?" A murmur of whispers rose like a swarm of disturbed bees. Scornful glances converged on the young man. Mrs. William, Sarah's mother, immediately stepped forward, her meticulously made-up face contorted in displeasure. She waved her hand in front of her nose as if shooing away a foul smell. "Security! Why was this kind of shabbily dressed person let in? Our party is world-class, not meant for low-class people like you." Publicly humiliated before hundreds of eyes, Kevin didn't blush or show any anger. He maintained a polite smile and bowed slightly. "My apologies for the inconvenience. Perhaps I have disrupted the joyful atmosphere." His words were humble, but when Kevin raised his head, his sharp, cool gaze swept across everything unfolding in the hall. Kevin's polite apology did nothing to ease the tension. In fact, it only fueled Sarah's arrogance. She had no intention of letting this entertainment end so soon. Moving closer to Kevin, she tilted her head, a mocking sneer curling at the corner of her mouth. Her sharp, piercing voice rang out across the ballroom. "Apologize. Does your apology buy even one button from the suit of any guest here? Look at you, worn out, outdated, reeking of failure. I truly don't understand what kind of strange company would send someone as unqualified as you into this room. You're polluting our atmosphere." Sarah's friends, spoiled young heirs and heiresses, immediately joined in like a pack of hyenas spotting fresh prey. Their newest model phones were lifted in unison. Camera flashes flickered incessantly. They began live streaming, their mocking laughter and venomous commentary ringing non-stop. "Hey everyone, come look at this. The billion-dollar representative in ripped sneakers at a high society party. Looks like an uncle selling insurance on the street, doesn't he? Sarah, kick him out. He's ruining the live stream's vibe." Amid the storm of scorn, Kevin remained as still as a rock. He didn't lower his head or fight back, just quietly observed the youths reveling in their own haughty performance. What was more terrifying than the youth's insolence was the attitude of the adults.
Mr. and Mrs. William, owners of the financial empire William Capital Brokerage, stood holding their wine glasses, watching their daughter humiliate someone with expressions of satisfaction, even pride. Mr. William, the most powerful man in the room, slowly stepped forward. He didn't look Kevin in the eye, but rather glanced past his shoulder as if Kevin were invisible. His voice, full of authority, silenced the surrounding noise. "Enough, Sarah. Don't waste any more time on this kind of person." He turned to Kevin, his gaze as cold as ice. "You heard us clearly, didn't you? A raggedy nobody like you isn't worthy of discussing billion-dollar deals with our family. Go back and tell your superiors that if they want to talk to the William family, they should send someone who knows how to be respectable." The entire hall held its breath, waiting for an explosive reaction or utter humiliation from the pitiful man. But there was none. Kevin only offered a faint smile, one that never reached his eyes. He nodded slightly, his voice still unnervingly composed. "Yes, I understand the William family's position clearly. In that case, I won't impose any further."
Kevin had barely turned around and taken a second step when a figure swiftly moved to block his path. It was Sarah. In her hand was a glass of deep red Cabernet Sauvignon, the premium wine uncorked specially for the evening's celebration. "Leaving so soon?" Sarah smiled, an innocent-looking grin laced with malice. "A guest in our home shouldn't leave without at least a drink, especially a special guest like you." Before the words had fully left her mouth, her wrist tilted slightly. Splash! The dark, blood-red liquid poured straight from above, drenching Kevin from head to toe. The wine splattered everywhere, soaking his shoes and staining the hem of his khakis. "Oops, sorry!" Sarah exclaimed, faking remorse, her hand covering a giggling mouth. "Consider it a little shoe-cleaning service. This wine costs more than your whole life, so be sure to enjoy the aroma tonight." The ballroom erupted in delighted gasps. Laughter swelled like crashing waves. Phones edged closer, flashes flickering nonstop, capturing close-ups of the soaked shoes and the triumphant expression of the William heiress. No one saw the act as excessive. In their eyes, toying with someone of lower status was just another form of post-dinner entertainment. Kevin froze in place. He slowly looked down at his waterlogged shoes, then gradually raised his head. The space around him seemed to freeze for a moment. He didn't bend to wipe them clean, didn't curse, didn't show the humiliation the crowd was expecting. Kevin looked straight into Sarah's eyes, then swept his gaze over the smug faces of Mr. and Mrs. William. At that moment, all the earlier politeness and deference vanished completely. His dark eyes grew terrifyingly calm. They no longer held the warmth of a human being. Instead, they were cold, sharp, and detached, like a machine's. This wasn't the look of a defeated man retreating. It was the look of a judge who had just signed a death sentence. "Thank you for your hospitality," Kevin said softly, his voice so light it made Sarah instinctively shiver, her smile faltering on her lips. He turned his back and walked straight toward the exit. His silhouette stood tall and solitary, yet carried an invisible weight that seemed to press down on the space behind him. The heavy door of the Sterling Crown Tower closed shut, heralding the storm about to break within the William family. The door of the jet-black sedan closed shut, and Kevin leaned back in the rear seat, letting out a long, quiet sigh. He looked down at his shoes, still soaked with wine, the sharp scent of alcohol rising in the enclosed space. His expression showed not a hint of anger. He reached into the car's compartment and took out his specialized tablet. With a light tap of his finger on the touchscreen, the security system scanned his iris to confirm his identity, and the high-level admin interface of Bryan Global Holdings, the true financial empire he stood behind, instantly appeared in a powerful blue-black theme.
Activate the risk analysis team and internal investigation unit, Kevin ordered into the microphone, his voice firm and authoritative, a world away from the deferential tone he had used earlier. Target, William Capital Brokerage. Priority level, urgent. In less than 30 seconds, the screen filled with data streams cascading down like waterfalls. Brighton Global's top financial experts, whether in London or New York, all received urgent summons through the internal network. His financial intelligence web began scanning deep into every corner of the William family's records. Vice Chairman, the voice of the head of financial security, came through the encrypted speakers. William Capital's files have been extracted. The AI system has just issued a red alert. We've detected severe abnormalities related to tonight's billion-dollar birthday gift deal. On the screen, the name William Capital Brokerage glowed bright red, accompanied by a blinking text line, Extreme Risk Concern, Level 1 Fraud Indicators. Kevin skimmed through the preliminary reports. The numbers did not lie. This startup acquisition deal was nowhere near as glittering as its surface suggested. Unjustifiable valuation ratios, questionable cash flows, and suspiciously intricate contract terms. This isn't an investment, Kevin murmured, tapping the glass screen lightly, his gaze sharp. This is daylight robbery, disguised as a commercial contract. The car began to move, gliding smoothly into the Los Angeles night, carrying with it the brewing storm about to crash down upon those still celebrating at the tower's peak. The car glided swiftly through the bustling streets, but inside, Kevin was immersed in a world of dark, intricate data. His analysis team worked with astounding speed. William Capital's weak encryption barriers were swiftly breached, exposing the hidden rot beneath the billion-dollar deal's glamorous exterior. "Sir, please turn to page 42 of the merger contract," the lead analyst's voice echoed through the speakers, tinged with tension and anger. Kevin zoomed in on the screen. His eyes caught the deliberately vague clauses cleverly embedded within complex legal jargon. They were deadly traps. Provisions to strip voting rights, mandatory share dilution terms, and most notably, outrageous penalty clauses with absurdly high fines. But that wasn't all. These financial statements are fake, Kevin immediately noted as he scanned the balance sheet. The startup's actual revenue is 10 times higher than what's reported. The Williams intentionally created false losses and manipulated cash flow to drive the company's valuation as low as possible. They were turning a tech unicorn into a lame horse to buy it cheap, then touch up the records to resell it to Brighton Global Holdings at an astronomical price. This was double-layered fraud. Suddenly, a deep red alert window popped up from the on-site investigation team. Criminal coercion detected. Attached was a series of files recovered from Mr. Williams' personal email server. Kevin opened a short audio clip. The noise of a bar, the sound of a table being slammed, and the slurred but threatening voice of a stranger. "Listen here, kid. You sign at that price or your company burns down tomorrow. You have a wife and a little girl in kindergarten, right? Don't make me come pick her up." Next was a covertly shot photo of a young man, the startup's founder, slumped over in a locked room surrounded by 3 large men in black suits, pressing the contract into his hand. The young engineer's hand trembled violently as he held the pen, his face ghostly pale, like a man broken. Kevin clenched his fist. This was no longer just business fraud. This was extortion. The William family not only looked down on the poor, they were willing to trample on others' lives and dreams to build their own high society facade. Kevin's eyes darkened, a cold fury spreading through him. He turned off the screen and leaned back in his seat. "They picked the wrong opponent," he whispered, his voice sharp as a blade. "They think they're the hunters, but they don't realize they've just angered a pack of wolves." Amid the serene silence of the luxury car, the voice of the corporate intelligence director echoed through the speakers, carrying undisguised disbelief. "Vice Chairman, we've just reviewed the entire bidding profile from William Capital. There is a fact so ridiculous it's hard to believe. The William family has no idea who you are. They genuinely believe you're just some low-level employee sent as a last-minute substitute. They are completely unaware that the man they insulted and drenched in wine is Kevin Bryan, executive vice chairman of Bryan Global Holdings, the $100 billion financial giant they've been begging on their knees to partner with. A heavy silence filled the space. The irony of fate was laid bare. The William family, with the arrogance of newly minted millionaires, had committed the deadliest mistake in the business world, judging a partner by appearance. They prided themselves on the billion-dollar deal, viewing it as their ticket into the ultra-rich elite. Yet they didn't know that the signatory deciding the fate of that massive sum rested in the hands of the very man they had looked down upon and humiliated. Kevin's lips curved into a faint smile, colder than ice. He glanced down at his simple, ordinary clothes, the perfect disguise that had stripped away the masks of the hypocrites. "Sir, should we reveal your identity now to stop their arrogance in its tracks?" "No," Kevin replied immediately, his voice low but commanding. "Complete silence. Block any information about Bryan Global's senior executives across all media channels." He looked out the window, the city lights passing by like streaks of shooting stars. In his mind, the script for the Williams' downfall was already drafted, step by step. "If I reveal myself now, they'll just be scared and offer a half-hearted apology. That's too easy for them," Kevin said, his eyes burning with restrained fury. "I want them to climb higher. The higher they climb, the harder they fall. Let them immerse themselves in the illusion of victory. Let them believe they've devoured their prey. I want to see how William Capital will destroy itself when they realize that they dug their own graves from the very first words they spoke." The car turned right, heading straight toward the suburban slums where Kevin knew he would find the most crucial piece to bring the Williams empire to an end. Leaving behind the glittering lights of the city center, Kevin's car wound its way deep into a dilapidated apartment complex tucked within a poor suburban area. The sharp contrast between this place and the Sterling Crown Tower made the air feel even heavier. The scent of damp mold and trash stood in sharp opposition to the smell of expensive perfume. Kevin stepped out of the car and went straight to the fourth floor, stopping before a wooden door with peeling paint. He knocked. A long moment passed before the door cracked open. In the narrow gap stood a young man, but his face was gaunt, eyes sunken with dark circles, and stubble grew unevenly across his jaw. It was Alan, the tech genius, the founder of the startup the Williams had just seized. Seeing a stranger, Alan shrank back, his eyes filled with utter terror. "What more do you want? I already signed. I sold it all. Please, leave my family alone." "You've already taken everything, all the money." Kevin raised both hands in a gesture of harmlessness and spoke gently. "I'm not with the Williams. I'm here to help you get back what they stole." Half believing, half doubting, something in Kevin's sincerity and quiet authority made Alan hesitate, then open the door. Inside, the room was a mess, scattered with papers. Sitting on an old sofa, Alan began to speak, his voice choked with anger and the bitterness of someone who had lost all faith in justice. "They're monsters," Alan said, trembling. "At first, they offered to invest, but when I refused to sell the company outright, they started playing dirty." Kevin quietly placed a professional recording pen on the table. A tiny red indicator light blinked softly. "They used their influence to block every funding source I had with the banks. They hired lawyers to sue me for copyright infringement, legal traps they set up themselves to threaten me with jail time and bankruptcy. But the worst part," he swallowed hard, his hands clenched together until they turned white, "was the mobsters. They intercepted my daughter on her way home from school. They sent me pictures of my wife shocking, with a knife in the frame.
They said if I didn't sign, my family would disappear in a traffic accident tomorrow. Tears of humiliation streamed down the young engineer's face. My company's true value was $50 million. They forced me to sell for $5 million, only a tenth of what it was worth. I had to sign to protect my family's lives. Now I've lost everything, and they're throwing a party, celebrating over my blood. Kevin sat in silence, listening. Each of Alan's words was a final piece completing the picture of a crime. He didn't say much, just carefully saved the recording file and placed it inside his inner jacket pocket. Before leaving, Kevin placed a hand on the broken young man's shoulder, looking him straight in the eye with a blaze of determination. "Hold on, Alan. Tonight is the last night they sleep peacefully. Justice is coming." Kevin walked out of the apartment carrying the most important piece of living evidence. The storm to bring them down had gathered all the energy it needed, ready to erupt.
1 a.m. In a secret office located in the building opposite the Sterling Crown Tower, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Kevin's team had transformed the room into a massive data processing center. On the large screen, scattered fragments of the crime began connecting into a complete and horrifying picture. "We have successfully recovered data from the old startup's cloud storage," a technical specialist reported. A series of original documents appeared. These included draft contracts with brutally oppressive terms, crudely altered financial reports, and most importantly, internal email exchanges between Mr. William and unscrupulous lawyers discussing how to back their prey into a corner. But the highest impact weapon was the footage from hidden cameras. Alan, the founder, terrified as he was, has secretly installed tiny cameras in his office before being forced to sell his company. Kevin and his team watched in stunned silence as the video played. 3 heavily tattooed men, armed and aggressive, smashing equipment and cornering the young engineer, while the lawyer representing the Williams calmly threw a stack of documents onto the table, his expression chillingly indifferent. Combined with Alan's testimony that Kevin had just brought back, this was no longer a civil dispute. This was ironclad evidence of organized extortion and death threats. Sitting across from Kevin was David Ross, a seasoned federal attorney known as the nightmare of white-collar criminals. He flipped through each page of the evidence, frowning, a cold sweat beginning to form despite the low air conditioning. After 15 minutes of suffocating silence, the lawyer removed his glasses and looked at Kevin with an expression of shock mixed with respect. "Mr. Kevin," Mr. Ross said, his voice low and serious, "I've handled hundreds of economic crime cases, but I've never seen a file as complete and detailed as this. We have everything: witnesses, physical evidence, motive, and even the crime scene." He tapped a finger lightly on the thick stack of documents, delivering a firm conclusion. "This is not a normal case. With the weight of this evidence, if we release it now, William Capital will collapse within 48 hours. No investor or bank would dare associate with a corporation tied to organized crime and such blatant fraud." Kevin smiled in satisfaction, his eyes sharp with the clarity of a man controlling the game. "Excellent," he said. "But a collapse now would be too quick. We need a process that's more painful. Prepare the files, but don't submit them yet. I want them to climb to their highest peak before the fall." The next morning, as the echoes of the lavish party at the Sterling Crown Tower still lingered, the William family awoke in the triumphant joy of the victors. William Capital Brokerage's stock had surged in early trading due to rumors of the imminent billion-dollar deal. Mr. Williams sat in his oak-paneled office, pen in hand, ready for the merger ceremony, a smug smile on his lips. But precisely at 9 a.m., hell began to unfold. At Bryant Global Holdings headquarters, Kevin sat before his desk, his gaze icy as he stared at the screen. He lightly tapped a single key. Send. A fateful email was dispatched from the office of the vice chairman of Bryant Global Holdings, stamped urgent and addressed directly to the board of William Capital, while being CC'd to every major financial partner and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Its content was brief, but carried the explosive power of an atomic bomb.
Bryan Global Holdings hereby officially announces the termination of all investment proceedings with William Capital Brokerage. Reason? Counterparty fails to meet ethical business and financial transparency standards. The news spread at the speed of light. In William Capital's offices, Mr. Williams' smile vanished. The pen in his hand clattered to the floor. Desk phones began to ring. His personal cell phone buzzed violently. "What the hell is this?" he roared, breaking into a cold sweat. "Why cancel? Everything was fine yesterday." Panic spread like a virus. Strategic investors, those present at the party the night before, started frantically calling to withdraw their funds. Rumors spread. Bryan Global is running. Something is seriously wrong inside William Capital. Last night's guests, who had laughed along with Sarah at Kevin's expense, were now scrambling in fear over their ties to the Williams business. But the blows didn't stop there. A follow-up punch was immediately delivered. The National Financial Oversight System, having received a signal from Kevin's team, imposed sanctions at once. On the stock market's electronic board, next to William Capital's ticker symbol, a glaring red warning appeared: under special investigation. All margin trading was suspended. Liquidity was frozen. Within just 1 hour, William Capital collapsed from its position as a soon-to-be global powerhouse. Mr. Williams slumped into his chair, clutching his chest, bewildered as to where this nightmare had come from. He still didn't know that the one pulling the strings of this disaster was the young man in worn sneakers his daughter had drenched in wine and shooed away just the night before. As the shock of the billion-dollar deal's cancellation still hung in the air, the atmosphere at William Capital headquarters tensed as a tightrope. A second nuclear bomb officially detonated. At exactly 10 a.m., the front pages of Los Angeles and New York's most reputable financial newspapers simultaneously published a shocking exposé. The article's title, bold and blazing red, hit readers like a death sentence. Scandal of the century. William Capital seizes tech unicorn using illegal tactics and death threats. The article was not filled with empty accusations. It was terrifyingly detailed. Every piece of evidence Kevin's team had gathered was skillfully leaked to the press. From the coercive contract, the photos of gangsters surrounding Allen, to the slurred, threatening audio recording from a William family henchman, the effect was immediate and brutal. On the stock exchange, William Capital's already shaky stock chart broke and plummeted vertically. A long, straight red line plunged into the abyss, wiping away hundreds of millions in market capitalization in minutes. A frenzy of sell orders triggered across the system, clogging the digital boards. "Sell! Dump it all! This company is done for!" Panicked cries echoed across trading floors. In the chairman's office, Mr. Williams screamed furiously into his phone. "Take that article down. I'll pay double, 10 times. Call the editor-in-chief now." He slammed his fist on the desk, veins bulging red on his neck. Mrs. Williams stood beside him, her face pale, hands trembling as she scrolled through the outraged comments on social media. She desperately tried calling their close friends in high society for help, but was met only with endless tones or notifications that the lines were unavailable. The people who had raised their glasses in toasts yesterday now saw the family as a plague to avoid. But their clumsy attempts to cover up were like trying to block the sky with a single hand. Banking partners immediately sent notices unilaterally terminating credit lines. Major investment funds urgently withdrew their capital to protect their reputations. William Capital's cash flow, the sole lifeline keeping the massive machine running, officially froze completely. From his office window, Mr. Williams saw a caravan of reporters' vehicles surrounding the building's entrance. He let the phone slip from his hand onto the floor, staring blankly into empty space. The empire he had spent a lifetime building through underhanded means was now collapsing before his eyes, so fast he could hardly breathe. By that afternoon, true disaster had completely submerged the power tower of the William family. On the market's digital board, William Capital's stock ticker was no longer falling because it had hit bottom. From its once proud price of hundreds of dollars, it had evaporated by 98%, becoming the very definition of a penny stock. The William family's wealth, largely tied up in shares, had vanished by billions of dollars in just a few hours. The figures in their bank accounts were now nothing but illusions. Outside the company headquarters, unprecedented chaos unfolded. Hundreds of clients, people who had trusted their life savings to this investment fund, now crowded the main entrance. Shouts and the sound of fists pounding on glass doors filled the air. "Give me back my money! Scammers! Mr. William, come out and answer for this!" Lawyers, representing thousands of furious investors, had officially filed a class action lawsuit in federal court. The piles of legal documents stood mountain high, demanding damages that's so massive that even if William Capital sold all its assets, it could never pay them back. And the final, finishing blow arrived. The piercing wail of sirens tore through the tense atmosphere. A convoy of black vehicles from the Economic Crimes Bureau and the Securities and Exchange Commission screeched to a halt in front of the building's lobby. Government officials in formal uniform stepped out holding emergency search warrants. This building is now sealed. No one is permitted to leave or destroy any documents. The door to the chairman's office flew open. Mr. William, the man who had arrogantly declared Kevin unqualified just the night before, now sat slumped on the floor, hair disheveled, tie askew. He watched with hollow eyes as officials sealed computers and filing cabinets. The phone on his desk rang one final time, a notification from their sponsoring bank: bankruptcy declared. William Capital, the massive financial ship once thought unsinkable, had officially hit an iceberg and was now going under. The William family stood on the brink of total ruin, stripped bare and helpless before the storm they never saw coming. Night fell over Los Angeles, but this time there were no parties, no glittering crystal lights, only darkness shrouding the downfall of the arrogant.
8:30 a.m. the following morning, at Bryan Global Holdings headquarters, the most powerful skyscraper in Los Angeles, the William family sat in a high-level meeting room, but without the arrogance from the party the night before. Mr. William was exhausted, haggard from lack of sleep. Mrs. William trembled. Sarah sat beside them, her face pale. They had come with a single fragile sliver of hope. Bryan Global had agreed to an emergency meeting to negotiate. They thought if they offered themselves cheaply enough, they could still salvage a shred of dignity and a fraction of their wealth. The heavy wooden door of the meeting room slowly opened. The sound of leather shoes striking the marble floor echoed rhythmically, full of authority. A man walked in, followed by 2 assistants and 4 top-tier lawyers. Gone was the faded windbreaker and worn sneakers. The man before them wore an exquisitely tailored Italian suit that accentuated his commanding stature. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch worth millions. But the most expensive item was his presence, the chilling, overwhelming aura of a ruler holding the power of life and death in his hands. Sarah's mouth fell open, her eyes wide. She stammered, pointing at the man who had just entered. "It's you, the cleaning guy." The man didn't even glance at her, walking straight to the chair at the head of the table and sitting down. He adjusted his cuff, his eyes sweeping over the 3 trembling people across from him, then spoke slowly. "Welcome to Bryan Global. I am not the janitor. I am Kevin Bryan, Executive Vice Chairman of Bryan Global Holdings." The room exploded in the minds of the William family. Mrs. William covered her face in shock. Mr. William looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his whole body trembling violently, his face drained of all color. Sarah staggered, her legs giving way, forcing her to cling to the edge of the table to keep from collapsing.
The man they had insulted, drenched in wine and driven out like a stray dog, turned out to be the very boss they were now kneeling before, begging for mercy. "Mr. Bryan, this is a misunderstanding. Mr. William tried to mumble an explanation. A misunderstanding? Kevin's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. The massive projector screen behind him lit up. First, the illegal coercive contract. Next, the trembling audio of Alan's confession and the gangster's threats. But the killing blow lay in the final file. Footage from that night's party appeared in sharp clarity. Sarah mockingly pouring wine on Kevin, Mr. William loudly declaring, "You're not worthy," Mrs. Williams sneering disdain. Everything was replayed in slow motion, a documentary of their ignorance and cruelty. Kevin interlaced his fingers and placed them on the table, his voice ringing like a judge's gavel. "You're here to negotiate, to beg for a lifeline." He leaned forward, looking straight into Mr. Williams' eyes. "I gave you a chance when I walked into that party dressed simply. I hoped you had enough humanity for us to partner honorably, but you didn't." He turned to Sarah, his sharp gaze making her shiver with fear. "Your only chance was lost the moment you taught your child to look down on others and the moment you thought money could cover every sin." He dropped the thick stack of files in front of them, signaling the end. There will be no negotiations.
The air in the meeting room went dead silent. Mr. William trembled as he picked up the final document Kevin had pushed toward him. His eyes were wide, his breathing ragged, as if on the verge of breaking. What is this?" Kevin adjusted his cuff, his voice calm. "That is the stock transfer notification. While you were panicking over the uncontrollable stock plunge this morning, I directed Bryan Global's affiliated funds to quietly acquire all the floating shares on the market. At the current dirt-cheap price, lower than the cost of the glass of wine your daughter threw at me that night, I have secured 51% of the voting rights." He stood up, placing both hands on the table, casting a shadow over the broken family. "In other words, William Capital now belongs to me, and my first decision as chairman of the board is dismiss the entire former leadership." Mrs. Williams' horrified scream echoed as the meeting room doors swung wide open again, but this time it wasn't waitstaff, it was federal agents. "Mr. and Mrs. William, you are under arrest for financial fraud, extortion, and organized asset seizure. All personal assets will be frozen for investigation." The cold, sharp click of handcuffs echoed, locking around the wrists of the couple who had once seemed untouchable. They were led away in utter humiliation, leaving their only daughter standing isolated in the vast meeting room. Sarah stood there, tears smudging her makeup, her whole body shaking. She watched her parents be taken away, then looked at Kevin, the man she had once seen as trash, now standing at the peak of power, holding the fate of her entire family in his hands. Kevin stepped away from the chairman's seat and headed toward the door. As he passed Sarah, he paused briefly. He didn't look at her with hatred or satisfaction. It was the gaze of someone who understood life's hard truths, directed at a pitiful soul. "Sarah," he called her name. Sarah lifted her tear-filled eyes to look at him. Kevin spoke, his voice low but unforgettable. "Sometimes the greatest lessons come from those we once thought weren't worth looking at." With that, he walked straight out without a backward glance. The door closed firmly behind him, leaving Sarah collapsed, her sobs echoing through the empty room. 6 months later. The William Capital empire had completely vanished from the Los Angeles financial map, replaced by a branch of Bryan Global. In a cramped office on the outskirts of the city. "Hey, you! Why is this coffee so watered down? You think you're still a high-class lady or something?"
The manager's sharp shout echoed through the room. Sarah flinched, quickly bowing her head to apologize. "I'm sorry. I'll make another cup right away." Sarah, now in cheap office staff uniform, her plain face etched with weariness, scrambled to tidy the cups and dishes. No more ball gowns, no more parties, no more high society friends. Her assets had been seized, the family home repossessed by the bank, and she now lived in a shabby rented room, barely scraping by on a low-paying administrative job. During her lunch break, Sarah sat on a park bench, chewing on a dry piece of bread. She looked up at the large advertisement screen on the skyscraper across the street. It displayed a news segment about Kevin Bryan, Entrepreneur of the Year who had just donated millions to a fund supporting young startups. On the screen, Kevin smiled graciously, his demeanor poised and dignified. Sarah looked down at her own worn-out flats, then back at the screen. A tear rolled down her cheek, bitter and salty. She had learned her lesson, but the price had been her entire life.